I spent 3 hours cooking that night. Not reheating something from the freezer, not ordering in, actually cooking. I even went to that little Italian grocery Claire liked in downtown Raleigh, picked out ingredients she used to rave about, and followed a recipe video step by step. I was determined to make her favorite: chicken marsala with roasted garlic potatoes and green beans sautéed in lemon butter. It had been a rough few months between us. Honestly, a rough couple of years. But I kept telling myself maybe all we needed was a little reset. Something to remind us, why we were still doing this. The table was set. Candles, real cloth napkins, even a little vase of flowers. It looked like something out of a movie. I was halfway through pouring her wine when she walked through the door. She didn't even say hi. "What's that smell?" Claire asked, setting her purse on the counter without looking at me. "It's dinner," I said, keeping my voice light. "Chicken marsala. From scratch." She raised an eyebrow, finally glancing at the table. "Why does it look like you're trying to impress someone?" That stung. I smiled anyway. "Just thought we could have a nice evening. It's been a while." Claire walked over and peeked at the food like she was inspecting a takeout bag. "Wow, you really went all out," she said. "I mean, it smells fine, I guess. A little heavy on the garlic." She picked up a fork, speared a piece of chicken, and chewed slowly. "Huh," she muttered. "Not terrible. YouTube?" I nodded. "Figures. You always follow directions to the letter. No instincts." She said it like she was critiquing a student project. I laughed a little, hoping she'd soften. "Well, I figured I'd play it safe this time. It's your favorite, right?" Claire rolled her eyes. "I haven't liked chicken marsala since college. You really think I'd eat this now?" She dropped the fork on the plate with a clink and reached for her phone. That was it. Not a thank you. Not even a polite, "looks nice." Just a casual dismissal and a jab about how out of touch I was. I sat there for a moment, unsure what to do with my hands. I looked at the food, at the candles, at the chair across from me, empty. I thought about the last time she made an effort for me. My birthday last month. She gave me a half-wrapped book I already owned and spent the evening texting during dinner. The time before that, I couldn't even remember. And yet, every time she said something cold or passive-aggressive, I let it slide. I kept hoping she'd notice the effort. That maybe one day she'd look at me the way she used to, back when we still laughed at each other's jokes and fell asleep tangled together on the couch. Instead, I got this. A plate of untouched food. A woman scrolling through her phone while I sat there pretending not to be embarrassed. I pushed back from the table and stood up. "Where are you going?" Claire asked without looking up. "Nowhere," I said. "Just not hungry anymore." She shrugged. "Suit yourself. I'll probably order something later." "Thai sounds good." I left the candles burning and walked out to the back porch, closing the door behind me quietly. I stood there in the dark, hands in my pockets, breathing in the smell of garlic and butter still lingering in the air. That was the moment it hit me. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was everything. The constant one-sidedness. The sarcastic remarks. The way I always tried, and she never even noticed. And when she did notice, it was just to criticize. I leaned against the railing, listening to the hum of cars in the distance. I wasn't mad exactly. Just tired. Really, deeply tired. I knew something had broken that night. Not with yelling or drama. Just quietly. The way a rope gives way after being pulled too tight for too long. I went back inside eventually, blew out the candles, and packed away the food. She didn't say a word. That was the night I stopped pretending things would get better on their own. I didn't know what came next. But I knew this version of us, couldn't continue. Not if I wanted to recognize myself when I looked in the mirror. Lucas called me that Saturday morning, his voice buzzing with excitement. "You better not bail on me, man. You promised." I rubbed my eyes, still in bed. "Did I?" "Yeah. Housewarming. Burgers. Beer. Friends who aren't named Claire. Ringing a bell yet?" I smirked and dragged myself upright. All right. I'll be there." Claire didn't notice when I left. She was on the couch in leggings and a hoodie, watching some dating reality show on her iPad with her earbuds in. I told her I was heading to Lucas's, and she just waved without looking up. Lucas had just moved into a small but cozy house in Cary. It wasn't fancy, but it had a backyard and smelled like fresh paint and takeout. When I showed up, he greeted me with a beer and a bear hug. "About time you got here. Come meet some folks." That's when I met Julia. She was standing by the grill, laughing at something Lucas had said. Short brown hair, dimples, an oversized plaid shirt rolled up at the sleeves. When Lucas introduced us, she offered her hand and said, "So you're Mark, the famous chicken marsala chef." I blinked. "Wait, what?" Lucas grinned. "I may have mentioned that little dinner fiasco." I chuckled, a little embarrassed. Julia just smiled and said, "Anyone who puts effort into cooking for someone else gets points from me." We ended up talking for almost an hour, tucked into a pair of camp chairs near the fire pit. Nothing flirty, nothing weird. Just easy, comfortable. We talked about food, music, bad breakups. She told me about her job as a freelance photographer. I told her about the last movie I watched alone on a Friday night, while Claire was too tired to do anything. "I don't know," I said eventually, poking at the fire with a stick. "Sometimes it feels like I'm invisible in my own relationship." Julia didn't try to fix it. She just nodded. That's a lonely place to be. The ride home was quiet. I kept thinking about how light I'd felt around Julia. How I didn't have to tiptoe or apologize for existing. When I walked in the apartment, Claire was asleep on the couch with a bowl of popcorn next to her and a show still playing. I stood there for a while. Then I turned off the TV, picked up the bowl, and started making a list in my head. Step 1, stop begging for crumbs. Step 2, take my life back. I didn't make a big announcement. There was no dramatic speech, no confrontation. Just small shifts, quiet, steady, deliberate. It started with a spreadsheet. I opened a blank one and labeled it Exit Plan. I calculated what I could afford on my own. Rents, utilities, furniture. I called a few places around town, mostly apartments near the trail where I used to run before Claire made fun of my dad's shoes, enough times that I stopped going. Within a week, I'd found a one-bedroom just outside of downtown Durham. Not huge, but clean, bright, quiet. It had big windows and a little balcony where I could picture myself drinking coffee alone in the mornings and actually enjoying it. I signed the lease without telling Claire. Not because I was hiding it, because I didn't know her that part anymore. Not yet. At home, nothing seemed different on the surface. Claire still came in every evening, dropped her purse on the counter, scrolled through her phone while I made dinner, and ate it in front of the TV without saying much. If she noticed I'd stopped asking about her day, she didn't mention it. If she saw that I wasn't reaching for her hand on the couch anymore, she didn't care enough to say. On Sundays, I started going out alone again. Lucas and I hit a local brewery one afternoon and ended up talking for hours. I told him I was moving out. He didn't act surprised. "You look lighter already," he said. "I've missed this version of you." The next weekend, I helped Lucas paint his guest room. Julia stopped by to drop off some supplies and stayed for pizza. She didn't bring up Claire, and I didn't bring up the fact that talking to her felt more natural than anything I'd felt at home in months. Back at the apartment, I started packing in the evenings. One drawer at a time. My side of the closet. The box of books she never touched. Claire never noticed, or didn't care enough to ask. She had her own routine. Her headphones, her shows, her scrolling. Sometimes I'd watch her sitting there, laughing at some TikTok video while I boxed up my life 2 feet away, and I'd wonder how long she'd been living without me before I even realized I was gone. The move was set for the first weekend in May. I planned to do it clean, quiet, no yelling, no tears, just the sound of a door closing softly behind me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was walking towards something, not away. The bathroom sink had been dripping for over a week. It wasn't a flood or anything, just an occasional plink every few minutes that echoed in the silence of the apartment. I had already packed most of my stuff into boxes stacked neatly in the hall closet, waiting for move-out day, but part of me wanted to see if Claire would notice. Maybe do something about it herself. Nope. That night, I finally brought it up while we were both in the kitchen. Claire stood at the stove, stirring pasta, earbuds in, humming along to whatever was playing. I leaned against the counter. "Hey, that leak in the bathroom's getting worse," I said. She didn't look up. So maybe you could call maintenance? Or at least report it." Claire pulled one earbud out. "Why can't you do it?" I exhaled through my nose. "I've done it the last 3 times. You live here too." She laughed under her breath and turned off the burner. "Oh my God, Mark. You are so needy lately. Like, clingy needy. What happened to you?" I blinked, caught off guard by how casually she said it. "I'm asking you to handle one basic thing around here," I said, keeping my voice calm. "That's not clingy. That's asking for partnership." Claire rolled her eyes as she poured the pasta into a strainer. "You've been in such a mood these days. Every little thing sets you off. It's like you won a trophy for existing. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest, but I kept it in check. Claire, I said, I'm tired of feeling like everything I do is invisible. Like I'm just furniture in this place. She slammed the pot into the sink and turned to face me. Then maybe you should find someone who worships the ground you walk on. I'm not that person. If you don't like how I am, go find someone else. I nodded slowly, letting her words settle. I already have, I said. She blinked. What? I found someone else, I repeated, meeting her eyes. An apartment. A new place. A new start. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I move out next weekend. For the first time in a long time, Claire was completely silent. No eye roll. No sarcastic comeback. Just stillness. I walked past her and grabbed a glass of water from the cabinet like it was any other night. Calm. Collected. Because I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't trying to get a reaction. I was just done. The next morning, Claire was already on the phone when I got out of the shower. I could hear her pacing through the living room, her voice sharp and fast. Hi. Yeah, this is Claire Jensen. I live at 14B. My boyfriend Mark is trying to transfer the lease, and I need to stop that process. No, I'm not on the lease, but I've lived here for 3 years. I stood in the doorway, towel around my shoulders, and waited. She turned when she saw me, eyes narrowed. Yes, I understand. But it's my home too. Well, I mean, we've lived here together. I just don't think it's appropriate that he gets to hello? Hello? Claire pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at the screen. They hung up on me, she said. They didn't hang up, I replied, walking past her toward the bedroom. They ended the call. Legally, you don't have a say. She followed me. So you just made the decision without me? Like I don't matter? I zipped up a suitcase and set it beside the bed. You told me to find someone else, I said calmly. So I did. I found myself. I found peace. Claire laughed, but it was hollow. God, you're being so dramatic. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel nervous or defensive. I felt free. Claire, you've spent years making me feel like I'm not enough, I said. Like everything I do is something to roll your eyes at. Like I'm lucky to be tolerated. She scoffed. You're really throwing away 3 years over a couple of arguments? No, I said. You threw it away when you stopped trying. She stood there, arms crossed, shifting from foot to foot, like she was waiting for me to break. Like she expected me to fold, like always. But I didn't. I walked back to the hall closet, opened it, and pulled out another taped-up box. She watched me, confused by how quiet I was. No begging, no pleading, no tantrum, just calm, clear action. You've changed, she muttered. No, I said, looking her in the eyes. I've just stopped trying to convince you to care. Claire didn't know what to do with that. Her whole playbook was built around me reacting, apologizing, chasing, trying harder. But now, I was done playing her game. And without control, without power, Claire looked small, rattled, like someone who just realized the thing she thought would always stay, won't. Moving day started out calm. I got up early, made myself a coffee, and sat on the edge of the bed for a minute, staring at the boxes neatly stacked by the door. Claire was still asleep, buried under a mountain of pillows, oblivious. I'd arranged everything ahead of time. Movers, truck, and Lucas, who said he'd swing by with his pickup just in case. I wanted the whole thing done in a few hours, simple and clean. At 9:02 a.m., I rolled the first suitcase out the front door. That was the exact moment Claire snapped awake. Wait, are you doing this now? She called from the bedroom. I didn't answer. She came into the living room barefoot, arms crossed, wearing one of my old t-shirts like it still meant something. You're seriously just leaving? The lease is in my name, I said. I gave notice. I scheduled movers. You knew this was happening. She scoffed. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I opened the front door wider. The movers were already backing the truck into the parking lot. Then came the sound of keys jangling. Lucas had arrived. He gave me a quick nod as he walked up with 2 coffees in hand. Claire's face twisted. You brought help? Yeah, I said. I brought help. That's when she bolted out the door in her slippers, rushed down the front steps, and parked her car sideways across the driveway, blocking the truck. Lucas looked at me, then at her. You want me to say something? No, I said. Let her tire herself out. Claire stood there with her arms spread wide like she was stopping traffic. You're not doing this, Mark. Not like this. But I was. I called the truck driver and told him to hang back a few minutes. Then I grabbed the first box and walked it out to Lucas's truck. He opened the tailgate without a word. Claire was shouting something behind us about how unfair this was, how I was abandoning her, how I was throwing away everything we'd built, but it all felt like background noise, like a TV on in another room. 10 minutes later, Julia pulled up. She waved as she got out, her girlfriend Sarah climbing out of the passenger seat behind her. They both wore moving gloves and carried iced coffees. Claire's mouth literally dropped open. "Oh," she said, voice flat. "Her." Julia smiled, unfazed. "Hey, Claire." "Morning." Claire looked back and forth between Julia and Sarah, then to me. "You're seriously letting them help you?" "Yep," I said, lifting another box. As Julia and Sarah started carrying things, I watched the way they moved, together, like a team. Quiet, efficient, respectful. Claire stood off to the side, arms limp at her sides, watching everything slip away in real time. Her tantrum wasn't working. Her guilt trips weren't working. Her car, still blocking the truck, now looked more like a desperate barricade than a protest. And me? I felt lighter with every box that left that apartment. By the time we loaded the last box into Lucas's truck, the sun was high and hot, and the front steps were littered with scuff marks and old tape. I had only a few things left to grab: a backpack, a lamp, the house key. Claire hadn't said much in the last 30 minutes. She sat on the arm of the couch, arms crossed, eyes glued to the floor. Her silence was louder than her earlier outbursts. As I walked back inside for the final load, she spoke. "So that's it," she said, not looking up. "You're just leaving?" I paused near the door, adjusted the strap on my shoulder. "Claire, I told you this was happening. You knew the date. You knew the reason." She shook her head and let out a bitter laugh. "No, I didn't know you were serious. I didn't think you'd actually walk out on us." I stayed quiet for a second. "Claire, what us? You checked out a long time ago." She finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp. "Wow, so now it's all my fault." I met her gaze. "It's not about blame. It's about reality." She stood, walked toward me, slower now, her voice softer but full of accusation. "You blindsided me. We had problems. Yeah, but everybody does. You don't just abandon a 3-year relationship like that." I stared at her, not angry, just tired. "Claire, I spent the last year begging for your attention, trying to make things work. You ignored me, dismissed me, made me feel like I was annoying just for existing." She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "You told me I was needy when I asked you to participate in the relationship. You mocked me when I cooked. You rolled your eyes when I made plans. You made it clear, over and over, that I wasn't worth the effort. And now that I'm finally walking away, you act like I'm the one who gave up." She blinked hard, like she wasn't expecting me to say all that out loud. "I didn't blindside you," I said. "You just stopped paying attention a long time ago." Her expression shifted, not anger, not sadness, but something smaller. Wounded pride, maybe. "You're really going to leave like this?" she asked quietly. "I am." I walked to the door, set the apartment key on the entry table. I looked back once more, not to second guess, not to make a scene, just to take a final mental picture. Claire stood still in the middle of the room, arms loose at her sides, surrounded by furniture that didn't look so permanent anymore. She didn't say anything else. So I didn't either. I turned the knob, stepped outside, and pulled the door shut behind me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running away from something. I was walking toward something better, toward peace, toward myself. The first morning in my new apartment, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the big corner windows and the smell of fresh paint and new carpet. No sarcasm, no tension, no one rolling their eyes as I made coffee. Just quiet. I made breakfast for myself. Eggs, toast, nothing fancy, and ate it on the small balcony with my feet propped on a crate I hadn't unpacked yet. It felt strange at first. Not bad. Just unfamiliar. Like I had finally stepped out of someone else's shadow and realized the light was pretty damn good out here. Over the next couple weeks, I fell into a new rhythm. I cleaned because I wanted to, not because I feared judgment. I went for long walks after work. I reconnected with people I hadn't seen in years, not because Claire didn't let me, but because I had stopped prioritizing anything that wasn't about keeping her happy. Lucas came by often, usually with a pizza or six-pack in hand, and one night Julia tagged along. She and I ended up talking on the balcony for hours while Lucas fell asleep on the couch mid-movie. She asked me about music I liked, and I realized I hadn't been asked that in years without someone correcting my answer. A few days later, Julia texted me. Still thinking about that Wilco song you mentioned. Made me cry a little. In a good way. It made me smile for a long time. Meanwhile, Claire was doing damage control. I started getting messages from mutual friends, people Claire and I had met through each other, asking if I was okay, if the breakup had really come out of nowhere, if there was someone else. It didn't take much to figure out where that narrative was coming from. According to Claire, I had ghosted her, packed up in the middle of the night, broken her heart. There were even whispers that I had started seeing Julia before I moved out, which wasn't true, and everyone who actually knew me knew it wasn't. Lucas shut that down pretty quickly. Don't worry, he told me. Everyone sees through her crap. She's spiraling. Apparently, Claire had tried the guilt angle with a few friends, crying on calls, sending dramatic texts about how she gave everything to the relationship and I just threw it away. Funny, since she hadn't lifted a finger in months. People stopped responding to her, one by one. Even her closest friend from work, the one she used to trash me to, eventually messaged me and said, "You didn't deserve that. Proud of you." As for Julia, things grew slowly, naturally. We weren't rushing. No grand declarations, no finally moments. Just walks, conversations, dinners where someone actually thanked me for the food. And laughter. So much laughter. One evening, Julia and I sat on the floor of my still half-furnished living room, eating Thai food straight from the containers. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You seem lighter now." I smiled. Because I am. It was a sunny Saturday morning, the kind that makes you want to stay outside all day. Julia and I had planned to hit the Durham Farmers Market. Nothing big, just pick up some fresh bread, maybe flowers for her apartment, and sample way too many jams we didn't need. She wore a faded blue denim jacket and held my hand as we strolled through rows of booths. The rhythm between us had become easy, familiar. We stopped for coffee and a cinnamon roll to split. She wiped icing from the corner of my mouth with her thumb and grinned. "You're hopeless," she teased. I was laughing at something she said about a corgi in a bow tie when I heard it. Wow. It wasn't loud, just sharp enough to cut through the breeze. I turned, and there she was. Claire, standing near the lavender booth with her friend Hannah, arms crossed, sunglasses perched high on her head like a crown. She looked out of place, like someone who'd come expecting to be admired. Julia's fingers tightened around mine, but she didn't flinch. "Claire," I said. "Calm, polite." "Didn't expect to see you here," Claire replied, eyeing Julia up and down. "I didn't know farmers markets were your thing." I shrugged. "Turns out I enjoy things when I'm allowed to." Claire laughed, short and flat. "Right. Well, I guess you moved on fast." Julia didn't miss a beat. "Hi, I'm Julia," she said with a warm smile, offering her hand. "You must be Claire. I've heard a lot about you." Claire looked at Julia's hand like it was an insult, then slowly shook it. "I bet you have." Julia wasn't fazed. "Mark and I were just talking about the lemon scones. Want a recommendation?" Hannah, clearly sensing the tension, looked like she wanted to disappear into a crate of tomatoes. Claire narrowed her eyes at me. "So this is what you traded 3 years for?" I took a breath, keeping my voice level. "No, I left because I wasn't respected. I wasn't seen. That was the real trade." Claire's mouth opened slightly, then shut again. Her expression faltered for the first time, like she didn't have a follow-up. "We should keep moving," Julia said cheerfully, already steering me away. As we walked off, I glanced back once. Claire stood there, her arms now hanging awkwardly by her sides, Hannah whispering something beside her. Julia leaned into me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Actually, yeah, I am." She smiled and took another bite of the cinnamon roll. "Good. Now let's go find those scones." And just like that, we kept walking forward, together, where the air felt lighter and the past couldn't touch us anymore.